So, some introduction, Apache Tamaya. We will look at the core concept and also bits of the history about all the stuff, and a few about give you an overview about the extension, what's there, and so you have a first impression what we can do with it. Everything started in 2012. That was that preparation time when we tried to establish a Java EE configuration JSR. That was that famous from with Oracle, the survey they did, and the configuration was one of the things people wanted to have in the EE8 stream. But unfortunately, there was a couple of reasons. I can tell you them individually at lunchtime. At the end, the initiative failed, and we were not able to start that JSR together with Oracle. At that time, I was working for Credit Suisse. And nevertheless, we said with a few people at the Java 1 in this year, we should continue that initiative, that it's not get lost, and perhaps we can get more people working with our view, how configuration should be solved in the API, in the Java ecospace as an API. And if everything would be possible, at the end, it could even be that we can do something like a standard out of that. We have the connections, we have the people on the JSR. What is currently still missing is we don't have enough adoption. But basically the idea is that at the end, that we could do a JSR with it. When you look at the people that are engaged, some of them you may know. I'm one of them. Then we have the Delta Spike there with Mark and Gerhard. We have Werner Keil, which also is involved in many other areas. David Blevins is our project lead, let's say. On the Apache side, we have also John Amond, which is helping. Oliver Bay Fischer works at the German Post. And there are a couple of more. And what is the essence? Yes, we want to have a common API for configuration access in Java. Minimalistic should it be, flexible and extendable, because configuration means a lot, could be a lot different additional things, how you would do work with it, so it should be really extendable and flexible. We will see with the extension that I would say we achieved that quite good. Everything is compatible with Java 7 and beyond. Unfortunately, the current version released in the Apache Maven Central is only compatible with 8 because of some compiler issues with the toolchain. The next release should come out, I would say, end of month, which is then bringing a lot with the feature. Everything I will tell you basically is the next release which is coming out. We are structured like a JSR, so we have a separate API, we have a separate reference implementation, we have lots of documentation around how these things work together. For every module there is some documentation. Java docs are also quite good. What we do not have is a TCK, because that's completely useless. We don't need it yet. But everything there everything else is more or less there. And as I said, we try to build up a community around the stuff, and at the end, if you're very successful, it's the target to create a standard out of it. Some of the use cases, as I said, we want to have one common API regardless what you are doing, and this API there you access configuration. You should not care about where it comes from. Should it or in which format does it is defined, or which policy is in place. You can exchange that basically. That's basically the central key point that is different to other APIs where you have manually put together something, manage it yourself. Somehow we give you an access point where you say you can program against it, where configuration can come out or even also be injected. And it's flexible with the SPI, how it is effectively built up, the configuration. Could also be adapted for different enterprises, etc., etc. We will have a look at that also as well shortly. Of course, we want to have redundancy reduced, meaning that we have typically when some IP address is configured multiple times, that I, for example, like in Docker, I can use the environment, I can reference to that. I can also do reference something else inside or outside of configuration as long as I have some way of resolving it. Of course, there's an SPI with which you can achieve that for any kind of mechanisms. Next, convention of configuration. Okay, clearly things, so there should be a possibility to have some defaults that are there that you may override or adapt them. So that should work as well. Here in that case, for example, you have the defaults read by from environment properties. You could even add again, add an additional step that this is different handled. Then you have just the configurations in the other areas which just reference the environment entries, for example. But it could also be something else. Then, as I mentioned, backends. You could have property files, XML files locally in the file system. You could have your configuration managed in a database. You could provide it via environment properties, for example, because you're running a Docker container, and that is then done by the environment around that, be it Kubernetes or whatever kind of environment you use there. You could also revamp or benefit from the infrastructure that you have. For example, when you have a Kubernetes container, you can connect to the etcd container and read the stuff there out. We also have support as a Zookeeper would also be possible when you have the Apache stack more in place. We have also support for console. There are various other things that could be added, but they're not yet there. But basically, you can exchange the backends and use the ones that are suitable for you in your company, in your environment, in your setup. And that's basically the same here. So you can just, from a bit other point of view, write in a project or a module, be it in the open source community, be it in your company, you can use the same API. But the good thing is that it is adaptable and flexible. You have your API on your side where you put together your code together and connect it with your configuration. And it is flexible, completely flexible, how it is built up. So when your module or your project is used in company 1, another has company 2, they may have typically they have different requirements for integration, and configuration is one of the part which also they need some kind of integration, and Tamaya is exactly there for helping with that. Oh, that's the wrong direction. Same thing is when you have a bigger company, typically you define some guidelines where your programmers typically should put their configuration, and there it's read, and you have some overriding rules, something like that. Could be incredibly complex. I don't recommend to do that in the full complexity range what I have seen, but typically there are some rules, different locations, typically formats, be it YAML, be it JSON, be it XML or something, whatever. INI files also would work, but you can also add your own configuration formats. And you could put that together in some kind in a separate jar that you can deploy and manage like a normal artifact, and that jar then combined with the Apache Tamaya together out of the box does what you have defined. It reads exactly that kind of locations, it reads that kind of formats, it puts together the configuration as you have it defined, and not every programmer has to care about that. They typically only use the API, and they have to know where are the locations where they can configure things. Then we have also some nice things that especially also help sometime. There is, for example, one module just I want to mention, which helps you documenting your configuration. That works, for example, also together with configuration injection. For each injection point, when it is get injection, event is raised to the Tamaya event system, and this event then is listened by that module, which out of that can put together information here just in text form. There's unfortunately not yet some UI where you can access it, where you see which kind of parameters and stuff is there. And on the other side, you can also add with your modules additional code where you can define which are your configuration points, and you can also define things like regular expressions or even validation classes registering that that help that the configuration that is then done by your users is the right one that fits and that's correct and that's working. So summarizing, why is Tamaya a good thing? I think it would be very, very, very useful in many use cases, because typically configuration is one thing. It's like logic. Nobody likes it, or everybody has to do it. I would say every project in the Apache space, typically you have two configuration solutions per project. I would say, looking and talking about different people, we have some similar situation also in the normal space out, where everybody, even when you write 2 or 3 lines of code, writing some property files, basically you write a configuration solution. And if you later on want to connect that with something else, you have to write again. Also, it's the same problem. Use Tamaya. You don't have to do that anymore manually. Of course, I mentioned we can document stuff. We have redundancies and inconsistencies we can remove, because we can resolve and refer to each other things. It's integratable in infrastructure, and basically it decouples configuration access, the point where configuration is used in your program, from the point how it is collected and how it is managed in the back. Short about the API. I can definitely not show you everything. For that, we don't have much time. From the Java SE part, because Tamaya is everywhere. You can use it with SE, you can use it with Java EE, also with OSGI it works. You just have a configuration interface, and you have a configuration provider singleton. You just say get configuration. That's it. And on it you have things. We also see that in detail, like get or default or get. You also see that you can access things in a typed way, because there is some converters where you can do in the inner one, the inner architecture, it's only string value pairs, and that's a conscious decision, because string value pairs are easily comparable, remotable, transferable to something of a network if you try there to get, and also independent at the end of the programming language in use. You can have a REST interface, and you can build up a configuration server and consume it with whatever programming language or system you would like. The interface itself, it's basically like a read-only map, which also adds that kind of type support. We also have a type regler for more complex cases. You can get out all the properties, and these here is like temporal adjustle or temporal query in the in the date and time API, just extension points where you can add additional stuff. Here an example of injection. Yep. Where you see that you have a class, you can also have default section, you can have the properties, you can even define multiple keys where he should look up configuration. He looks first for that one, also for that one above, combined with that one. Then as a second, he uses that one plus that one. And this one is an absolute key here with the brackets. That's the third one. And the first where he finds something is the value that then here gets injected, for example. Of course, also with injection, you have full type support. You have here, you see it with long, you have default values. You can also configure your custom converters, lots of stuff. The API, the injection API, is totally the same if you inject it in a pure SE environment, when you use CDI for injection, if you use OSGI. In OSGI, the services, the OSGI services are injectable. On SE, you just have your object, and then you can just say configure, and the injection will happen when you don't have any injection container in place. In CDI, in the CDI space, you don't see anything. It just happens. The property source is the most important SPI, where you can add configuration data. Every property source has a name. You can access key directly. You can get out all the properties. In case where a property source is not capable of deliver all the properties, it doesn't matter. Just give the single keys back. The ordinal we will see is important for the concept of ordering. And of course, sometimes I don't want to register one single source because I have, for example, a folder with a dynamic number of files within it. So I need something like a property source provider. Design, how it works. You have from the outside the configuration. Inside you have a configuration context. Could be multiple ones. Normally you have one, but in certain cases, you depend on the environment, you have multiple. You have an ordered number of property sources, which are just a chain of things where you combine the value. At the end, the outcome here is just a raw string value, which then can be filtered and at the end converted if you have a non-string end type. And how these values here are combined is configurable by that combination policy. Imagine when you have lists of things, collection support, you don't want just to override, you want to add up the different values to a full list, for example. That's the reason why it's there. There is a service context manager, which is basically controlling the life cycle, so you can even then combine it with CDI, and you could also then register, in that case, property sources using CDI mechanisms. That's an extract of the extension modules you have. You see here functional extensions where you can, for example, do like subsections and something like that. You can have thread local filtering and do stuff, or different kind of injection variants, be it with CDI or in standalone mode. You have resolvers where you just can have placeholders where you can reference things dynamically within your configuration. Resources is basically the ant-styled resource resolution pattern, different formats, YAML, JSON, INI. The mutable config is a module where you also can change things and configuration and write back to some backend. There's some server remote stuff, and collection support is also added to the next version. So what you want to do, more EE support would be nice. Additional things, additional runtime integration. And what we are definitely, as I said, we want to like to build up a community. So if you are interested in the project, look at it, join our mailing list. And even if you have time for contribution, we are completely open, would be very nice. A few links. And so that is it. Time is over.